Hello and welcome to Halcyon Blink. My name is Ron Bryce. I'm going to be your host for this episode. On this edition, let's talk about an old school action movie, which depresses me to say because it shouldn't be old school. I remember it coming out and being fresh and new and exciting, and yet it's already 15 years old. V for Vendetta. When the Wachowskis were white hot around the time that the Matrix films were being produced and released, they took a side project, taking Hugo Weaving with them, albeit not originally. I believe it was a different actor that was cast, and they ultimately got Hugo Weaving in, albeit a lot of the scenes in which he's seen to be acting, he's not actually in, because they shot the majority of the film with the prior actor.
Oh, this is awkward.
In any event, V for Vendetta. So it's effectively a story about a dystopian-style England where it has been taken over by a tyrannical government, led predominantly through the use of fear and oppression tactics. Therein rises the hero, V, a mysterious figure who, through the movie, is learned to have been a victim of the regime through testing for a virus that it's released on its own population in order to ascend to power.
And together we shall give them a 5th of November that shall never, ever be forgotten.
A few moments later.
What's good about this movie, if you've not watched it? Well, for one, it's the Wachowskis, so you know the fighting is going to be
My turn.
bellissimo, and this film is no different. The end sequence, for instance, is wonderful. The impactfulness of the strikes, the elegance of the fighting is unrealistic as hell. It's about as ungritty as it's possible to get, and the one-sided nature of V versus any poor he's likely to encounter is improbable at best, but it is still wonderful to watch. The story and the characters are where this movie really shines, and where in many ways it's superior to The Matrix. The character of Natalie Portman's character, Evie, I should say, is sort of caught up in this whole mess. She encounters V on the night that he begins his attack on the regime, threatening to blow up the Houses of Parliament in precisely 1 year's time from November the 5th, which is the inspiration behind his mask and his character. Interestingly enough, that mask has now gone on to become the anarchical... I can't even say the word, it's so complicated and quintessentially British. The anarchical mask of V is the Guy Fawkes mask with the broad smile. That's his mask that he utilises in the film. It was designed unique for this film, and the Guy Fawkes persona is one that he adopted as part of the symbolism of his taking on the government and attempting to blow up a symbol of their power. What works well in this film is the dynamic between the two, because it is meant to be a love story inherently, and his redemption of his character versus because he's very vengeful and rage-filled, and in those moments he's sadistic, he's calculating and menacing, because his rage is hidden behind this expression. It never shifts. And so he has to convey everything with his voice and his movements and how he lurches over people, and it's just a masterful exhibition of acting ability versus a lack of the ability to emote. It's wonderful.
The only thing that you and I have in common, Mr. Creedy, is we're both about to die.
How do you imagine that's going to happen?
With my hands around your neck.
You can do it! Cut his fucking head off!
The supporting cast, however, the problem is being an English person watching this film. It's clear that Yanks produced it, because Mummy, what, pip, cheerio? Deary me. I mean, Stephen Fry is in this film, and the problem with that isn't that it's Stephen Fry. I love Stephen Fry to death. Is that he's one of the most well-spoken people, perhaps in the country, and he doesn't represent England as a whole. There's not very many people I know who speak even remotely like him. In fact, in the Midlands, where I hail from, This is how we all kind of talk. In fact, I'm probably a little bit posher than most people in the way that I enunciate and use my vernacular. So it feels disingenuous in that sense to me, but to Americans or to a worldwide audience, I imagine this probably feeds into the perception of England being tea and biscuits and whatnot. But like I said, the action is great, the music is subtle and nuanced. It's not something that is something that's prevalent from the film. There's nothing iconic about the music or the soundtrack, but the way it's shot is wonderful. It feels almost comic bookish at times. There's moments where the freeze frame is just a perfect, its cinematics are perfect in the way that it's conveyed its ideas purely visually. I will suggest though that the story becomes a little convoluted towards the middle, and some of the characters become oddly, they pontificate on things a little bit too much, like the main detective in this. There's a segment at the end where he's sitting back and saying, oh, well, I know everything that's going to happen. Okay, the other detective says, can you tell me what's going to happen? Well, when I say I know what's going to happen, I can guess. And he makes a very generic and thinly alludes to what might happen as a result of escalating tensions, which any idiot could do. So that scene kind of fell on its ass a little bit. Also, the scene in the middle where V disguises himself as a previous warden of the prison that he was being held at in order to throw the detective off. I didn't really understand how that fed into the rest of the story either. But the action scenes are excellent. The protagonists are really good. John Hurt as the sort of tyrannical giant head on the screen is now an iconic image in of itself, and plays that role really well. The calculating, anger-based rhetoric that then feeds into this fear-based rhetoric that then recedes towards the end of the film as the succession rate. His visage becomes more strained and he's clearly stressed out by the whole situation, whereas V remains constant throughout the film, calm, collected, except for in his interactions with Evie, who goes through her own personal transformation throughout the course of the film, becoming a strong, self-reliant woman through her experience as she goes through this with V, ultimately falling in love with him towards the end, which you could look at two ways. You could say that she understands his plight and maybe relates to it now that she's been caught up in it, but frankly, it's a really bad case of Stockholm Syndrome when you consider that he effectively kidnapped her in the first instance, let her go into danger to justify taking her back into captivity, tortured her when he captured her again, and then released her when she'd already gone through all this shit. So he's responsible for f***ing her up. So he's not exactly a sympathetic figure in the strictest sense of the word, because he is hell-bent on vengeance, but you can understand his motives clearly, and he's charismatic as hell. The individual scenes between him and Evie, especially the initial instance where he's cooking her breakfast, it's a quaint scene, it's well shot, the dialogue is really interesting and funny.
Can I ask what happened?
There was a fire a long time ago. Ancient history for some. Not really very good table conversation. Now, would you care for a cup of tea with your egg?
And both in characters are engaging. So as far as a movie is concerned, V for Vendetta gets a solid 7 out of 10 from me. In fact, maybe edging to an 8. I'm gonna be kind for once. An 8 out of 10 experience, just because even though it is a little bit convoluted and some of the goddamn accents are just bloody terrible. They are bloody what not terrible, boss.
That's delicious.
Good.
God, I haven't had real butter since I was a little girl.
Goody gumdrops.
Don't like it, but it's not enough to detract from Hugo Weaving's his performance as a voice artist, because predominantly, again, he wasn't behind the mask for a lot of those. And Natalie Portman's interaction with him on that basis, it deserves to be commended. So if you're after an action film with maybe just a hint of political overtones, just a hint though, not a lot.
Hey, I doubt it.
Okay.
Then this is definitely a film you should check out. So if you haven't checked it out, tell me what films you have watched to satiate your bloodlust for a kung fu, non-gun wielding version of Batman. If you have, tell me in the comment section what you liked about the film, whether or not you would have preferred to have maybe kept him alive to see a sequel, or if you'd like to see a prequel of the films, or if you'd like to see the Wachowskis get back to their roots and start doing this sort of shit again. I know I would, because I love me some seamless kung fu. In the meantime though, thank you very much for watching this episode of Halcyon Blink. Please like, share, subscribe. Check out some of the other content creators in the description below. Follow me on Twitter, and as always, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you guys in the next episode of Halcyon Blink.